There are people that want to join the United States Army, but they have questions. There are a lot of questions out there. There's questions that I see people ask online, people ask me personally in the comment section, on social media and everything. And I wanted to cover some of those commonly asked questions that people ask about being in the United States Army, about joining the United States Army. And I've got 10 that I would like to outline of these common questions that people want to know about being in the United States Army. I'm U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and let's talk about these 10 frequently or commonly asked questions about being or joining or just the United States Army in general. What's up, my friends? Welcome to a brand new video. Today we're talking about 10 things I've outlined as far as some pretty common questions that I get to myself, that I see online, all sorts of different ones that maybe you want to know, maybe you're just curious about, maybe you're already in the Army and maybe some of these are still helpful to you because maybe you didn't know about these things. So nonetheless, if this is the content you want to know about, you want to get more information about the United States Army, and make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below, clicking on that bell, join the notification platoon, all of that fun stuff, and let's dive into things. Let's start off with the very first one. First one, probably a really common one. Do I qualify for the United States Army? So there are a number of factors that kind of determine if you do qualify for the Army. First one is that you have to either be a US citizen or legally living in the United States. I actually received quite a few questions of people like wanting to join the United States Army from another country. You got to understand that the Army does not pay, or the military for that matter, does not pay for you to come from another country to come to the United States. A lot of people think that that's their ticket out of that country. Maybe they don't like that country, whatever the case is. You have to be a legal resident to live in the United States. So either you have to be a US citizen or you have to move to the United States and live there legally. Probably means if you're in that scenario that you probably should make sure to find a job because you might not be able to join the Army right away, or maybe not even at all. You might not even qualify for the other requirements I'm going to talk about. But nonetheless, you got to either be a US citizen or live at least in the United States. Another thing to kind of factor in there is that if you are not a US citizen, you will not be able to get a security clearance. That means you can't be an officer, you can't get a certain job or a certain MOS that requires a security clearance. So that does limit you if you don't have a US citizenship, but doesn't completely eliminate you. The other thing is the education, right? You have to have a high school diploma or a GED or equivalent. Now, the Army did kind of think about getting rid of that, maybe temporarily kind of a thing, but then they quickly backpedaled on that and be like, never mind, that's a horrible idea. But there is still ways that you can join if you don't have a high school diploma type of thing or GED. There is a very, very small percentage of people that they do allow to still join if they don't meet that certain quota that they have, of where, they only have maybe, 10 slots or 20 slots or whatever for the specific area to be able to allow people to come into the Army without a high school diploma or a GED. But if those are already filled, then you won't qualify for that because it's a very small percentage that they allow people to join without having a high school diploma or a GED. Otherwise, you need to have that. They are going to run a background check on you, make sure you don't have like felonies, you don't have any warrants, you don't have any kind of other outstanding things that could come back to bite you in the ass if you're off to basic training and now, you have these unpaid parking tickets that never got paid or whatever. So they are going to run a background check on you. And I guess if you really want to, you can kind of run a background check on yourself. I do have a link down below to a website called Truthfinder that you can run a background check on you, but be aware there are some things that just aren't publicly available. Like if you had something that happened in California, California's pretty strict on some things, so it might not show up, but you can get maybe a generalized idea as far as maybe some things that might possibly pop up if you want to check out that link down in the description box for Truthfinder. The other thing is there is a test. You either have to take the ASVAB or the PCAT. It just kind of depends on what the recruiter wants you to take, but nonetheless, it's a multiple choice type of questionnaire that is, if you do the ASVAB version, it's pretty long, PCAT's a little bit shorter, but it's going to ask some general knowledge types of things, and these help to determine if you qualify for different jobs and make sure you're at least smart enough to be able to join the Army, because if you can't pass a certain specific, I don't know what the ASVAB level of education is, but if you can't pass that specific level of education, then you don't qualify to join the Army. Last one is there is a physical. Once you've kind of done all that stuff, you go to what's called MEPS. This is the actual station where you kind of start the process of actually joining the Army, and at that location you will see a doctor and go through a number of physicals to make sure you're physically able to do basic training and physically able to be in the United States Army. All right, so that question was pretty lengthy, but let's move on to the second commonly asked question about people wanting to join the Army. And that is, why should I join the Army compared to other branches? And I have done a video talking about, why the Army is the best branch to join. And sure, it's a little bit of kind of just having fun and everything. But in some cases, I do believe that in certain kind of scenarios, it might be the best one to join. But a lot of it really depends on you overall. The main one why I usually say that the Army is the best one to join is because if there's a specific job you want to do, you can pick it in the Army, where the other branches don't exactly work the same way. It's kind of something like where based on your qualifications, then you can pick from a bunch of, jobs that are available. You pick like multiple of them, and then whichever one becomes available first or they need most, they're going to put you in that one. So you don't really get to pick the exact job you want to do, where in the Army, as long as you qualify for it and it's available, you know right away what the exact job is going to be, where a lot of the other branches kind of works in a similar way where you just pick from that list and then maybe later on find out, hey, you're going to be this, and if that's not what you wanted, then you're kind of screwed, I think. So, but there's a lot of other factors. I mean, if you want to be part of the individuals that if some shit hits the fan, so you got combat zones going on, you want to be involved in that type of scenario, Army and Marines, probably the best branches for you. If you want to stay as far away from that, probably the Space Force, maybe even in some jobs, Air Force is best for you. If you want to be on a ship, the Navy is a great one, but there are some jobs in the Marines that also allow you to be on a ship. You want to work around aircrafts, then probably the Air Force, and there's a lot of other kind of scenarios. It really depends on what specifically you want to do. If there's a specific job you want to do and one of these branches has the better opportunities for that, then that's probably the better branch to go for. Also, if you probably care about better living, as far as a better barracks or better treatment of living, then probably Space Force, Air Force is probably for you. Army and Marines, probably not so much. Next question that people want to know is, how much money will I make? Well, it's pretty easy to kind of find out. You can look online and you can see the pay scale. It does change throughout the years because of like inflation, cost of living, all sorts of things that, rise and fall or whatever kind of thing. So pay does usually increase over the years to kind of account for that kind of a thing. But the other thing you need to understand is that base pay is just the base pay on your rank. That's not really everything all in one. Because a lot of people look at that base pay, let's say for like an E1 in the Army, and that's pretty low, but you're not going to be an E1 for very long. Probably within 6 months, you're probably going to be E2, E3 kind of a thing. So you're not going to be at that E1 rank for very long. You're going to start working your way up pretty quick. But with that pay scale, you got to understand that's base pay. There are a lot of other things you would have to do like in the civilian world, such as paying rent, paying utilities, paying for healthcare, that you don't have to worry about in the Army. If you're in the Army, then let's say, especially on active duty, right, you have your base pay based on your rank, but additionally, let's say if you're a single soldier, you're living rent-free in the barracks, you don't pay utilities, you would have to have that in the civilian world. If you're married or you have a family type of thing, then you're going to get paid extra to be able to cover the cost of living for you to pay for rent or pay for a mortgage or something like that. So base pay isn't solely what you want to look at things on, but that's a good kind of baseline to understand. There's that. But then also factor in, you're not having to pay for living, not having to pay for healthcare, not having to pay for even food, because even if you're a single soldier, you can go eat in the barracks for free. If you're married, then they pay you extra to be able to buy food and everything. So there's a lot of other factors that are also kind of tied in there. I'll even pop up a card that pops up of me kind of explaining, I think, some of the pay features and all the kind of other benefits kind of get rolled into it, so you can understand it a little bit better if you want. Next question is, what is the difference between active duty, reserves, and National Guard? An easy way to look at it, active duty is like full-time job, you're doing full-time, 40 plus hours, whatever kind of a thing, whereas reserves, National Guard, part-time. So your active duty is full-time, Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week, sometimes more, sometimes the weekends if you're going to the field or you're deployed or whatever, whereas the reserves and National Guard is part-time, so you have, 1 weekend a month, so there's going to be one specific weekend during that month where you're going to have to come and do training for 2 days, maybe 3 days, or you're also going to have 2 weeks during the year where somewhere in that year you're going to be spending 2 weeks straight of doing training. Sometimes there's a little extra in there and stuff, but it's part-time. So that means if you're doing reserves and National Guard, you still need another source of income, because just solely doing reserves and National Guard time is not going to be enough to probably pay the bills. You're going to probably still need a job in the civilian side to be able to pay your bills that you probably have to pay. But the pay works differently. Like if you're looking at that pay scale I talked about earlier, on the Reserves National Guard side, you're not getting that full pay, because that's what you would get paid for a whole month of doing drill or being on active duty type of thing. Whereas this one's like a different version of that, where it's 2 days equivalent of that. So divide that by 30 or whatever. I don't know how they work it for National Guard reserves, but it's not that full amount, right? You're only getting paid for 2 days or however many days you're doing drill for. The healthcare is also a little bit different on the Reserves National Guard. You have to kind of pay into it. Where on active duty, it's a lot better. You actually get full-on healthcare, all free and everything like that. So it does vary a little bit, based on active duty or Reserves National Guard as far as how your healthcare works. Your living and everything too, like your living is taken care of while you're on active duty, but for your Reserves National Guard, you still got to figure out a place to live. That kind of ties into the next one, which is, where will I live or where will my family live? Well, let's say active duty, right? Active duty, if you are a single soldier, you're gonna live in the barracks. It's free. They put you in the barracks. You have a barracks room. You might have a roommate based on your rank type of thing, based on how the barracks are at that unit. But nonetheless, you're gonna be taken care of. You're gonna be living in those barracks. If you have a family, you get a couple options. You can choose to live on post if there's available housing and they put you in on-post housing. You don't receive that extra BAH money, which is money you would use for rent, but you do have a free house to live in and you don't have to worry about utilities or anything either. Or you do the other option, which is to live off post, and then you receive that extra money to be able to help you pay for rent, pay for those utilities and everything like that. So those are your options for active duty. National Guard reserves, you have to have your own kind of thing, right? You're only doing that temporarily, part-time for those 2 weeks or those 2 days or whatever the thing might be. And then outside of that, you have to find your own place to live. They don't give you a place in the barracks if you're single, none of that kind of stuff. So you're gonna have to still come up with a plan because like I talked about earlier, you're gonna need probably a full-time job still because reserves and National Guard pay is not gonna be enough to live off of. And then you're gonna also need a place to live when you're on reserves and National Guard. Next question, will I get to travel the world? I know that's a lot of things that people think they get to do in the military, and in some cases, maybe. Sometimes it depends on your unit, sometimes it depends on your MOS, certain other kind of factors that kind of do play into there. A Navy might be a good one, in the branch-wise for traveling the world, but outside of that, let's say like Army, which we're mainly focusing on here, maybe in some scenarios, but not actually a lot. You might have things like training deployments to take you over to Germany, over to Poland, or whatever kind of a thing. You may get stationed overseas type of thing, but it's not going to be like a all the time occurrence, right? It's going to be here and there in certain kind of patches of time frame based on your unit, and based on your unit, it might be more frequent or less frequent. It really just kind of depends on the missions, but it does kind of vary. I would say if you're someone who really wants to travel the world, the Navy might be the better choice for you, where Army, there's opportunities, but not that frequent. It's not going to be like a all the time type of thing usually. If there was like a lot more combat deployments going on, then that's not exactly a place you probably want to visit, but that might be a little bit more frequent of a thing. Outside of that, training deployments, you might have it once a year, maybe once every other year, maybe several years, you go without doing any kind of traveling to any kind of training deployment, and then finally one comes up 3 years later or something. So it really varies. Next one is, can I pick where I get stationed? And maybe there's some possible scenarios where you could possibly pick where you're going to get stationed at. Also, if you're Reserves National Guard, you're just in the local area. You don't actually get stationed anywhere. This is more of an active duty thing. Active duty thing, you're going to get sent somewheres where they need you or where they need your job type of thing. And there are opportunities for that. I did a video a while back where the Army is actually allowing people to pick their first duty station, and it's a certain ones, right? It's not going to be like, from every Army duty station. There's select duty stations where they really need people at, certain MOSs and everything too, so there might be that opportunity. Outside of that, they do have sometimes what's called the wish list or the dream sheet in AIT. That's basically where you get to pick some duty stations, and if one of those happens to be one that needs your MOS, then they might send you there. If not, then they're going to stick you where they need you. So outside of those initial opportunities to possibly pick where you're going to get stationed at, there are other opportunities to kind of pick where you want to get stationed at, like when you re-enlist, when you renew your contract, you can possibly ask to be sent to this location. If it's available, then you might be able to re-enlist to be sent to that location. Sometimes you can call what's called your branch manager, and you can talk to them. If you've been at a certain location for a while, then sometimes you can call them up and be like, hey, I'm looking to get out of this place. I would like to try to go here. And if there is some available slots for you, they might be able to put you on orders to be able to reassign you to that new location. Next question, when will I get to see my family? And you will have opportunities, especially if you're on active duty, right, to go see family. If you're in the Reserves National Guard, well, you probably can see them all the time because you're not full-time. For active duty soldiers, you get 30 days a year. Now, you do have to build that up, so you don't initially just get those 30 days, but you build up 30 days for a whole year of vacation time that you can possibly use, and usually the units have what's called block leave. Block leave is where they block off maybe like a week or two to say that, hey, we're not going to do any kind of critical training during these 2 weeks, and we're going to allow as many people as possible to be able to take vacation during that time frame to go see family, to go on a vacation, whatever they want to do. Those are typically like maybe around 4th of July, around Christmas, but units will kind of offset that a little bit so that way everybody's not taking vacation at the exact same time, but you do have those kind of usually common time frames around those time areas of where block leave might fall in, and that might allow you to take a week or two to go see your family, to go visit, loved ones, or just have a vacation to get some me time, I guess. Outside of that, there might be opportunities like if you live nearby, you might be able to go visit them during the weekends, because you usually do get weekends off as well as holidays and everything. And then if you happen to have like a 4-day weekend, you can put in for a mileage pass that may allow you to go outside of that certain mileage radius of usually 350 miles or 250 miles radius, but you have a certain mileage radius you have to stay within. And if you want to go outside of that radius, then you have to do what's called a mileage pass and be able to do it that way to be able to go see family. So there are a lot of opportunities to be able to do that. If you're in the field, then of course you can't just leave the field to go visit family. If you're on a deployment, depending on how long the deployment is, there might be opportunities for you to go and take a little bit of a vacation from that deployment to come back for maybe like 15 days and then come back to that deployment. That really just varies on the length of the deployment and the mission that's going on. So there's different kind of opportunities to go see family. It's not like a thing where you go and you sign up for the Army for 4 years, and that means 4 years of not seeing your family. No, that's not gonna be the case. Leading into the next one, how long do I serve? And usually your contracts could be anywhere from as little as 2 years to maybe as long as 6 years. If you want to do more than those terms, then at the last year of your contract, that's when you have the opportunity to be able to re-enlist, to extend your contract or sign up for X amount of years more. Now, in the example, let's say you only do, 4 years, right? You sign up for a 4-year contract. Well, you do still have an 8-year commitment. That doesn't mean, though, that you have to do 8 years of doing the exact same thing for the whole entire 8 years. You have what's called the inactive reserves that you would go into. So you did the first 4 years on active duty, let's say, for example. Then the other 4 years that are remaining to make that 8 years are on what's called inactive reserves. Inactive reserves is kind of like they call you up if they need you. If there was something that really went down and they needed to call you back, they could call you back within that time frame. But outside of that, if they don't really need you, there might be some things where they need you to come into this nearby reserve station to go do a class for a day, which they pay you to go do, or you do something online or something like that. And you might have that a couple times, during that inactive reserve time. Maybe during that 4 years, you do it once a year, maybe once during that whole 4 years or whatever. If you do more than 8 years, then you don't have any inactive reserve time and you're just simply done when you get out of the Army. If that's after 8 years or 10 years, or you go all the way to retirement, then that just is kind of based on what you want to do. There is a certain time limit as far as your age. I think it's like 64 or 65 that you will have to retire by. But otherwise, usually around like 32 years, there's certain criterias that usually means you have to either retire. If you're in a command sergeant major position, you might be able to do more than 32 years in the Army, but there is also an age limit as far as they don't want you staying in the Army past a certain age, especially with active duty. Now, the 10th and the last one we'll talk about here is, can I change my MOS? And maybe. It's not a guaranteed thing. I know some people think that, I'm going to join the Army, be this specific MOS, and if I don't like it, I'll just change my MOS and change my job. That's not always going to be the case, right? For the most part, let's say you get into a specific MOS. You signed up for this MOS and you thought it was going to be this, but it turns out that it's not like that, or it's not what you expected it to be. You don't like it, and you want to change your job. Well, that's not going to be a thing you can do usually right away. You're going to probably have to wait until the last year of your contract to do what I talked about earlier, to re-enlist, and during that process you can choose to reclass, which would allow you to change your job, but again, it's not guaranteed. It still has the same factors as when you join the Army. It still is based on requirements. You have to meet the ASVAB requirements for that MOS, but there also has to be the availability. So if there's not availability for it, even though you qualify for it, they're not going to let you reclass to that MOS. A lot of times also, if you're in an MOS that they really need people in, they might not want to let you leave. So you might have that kind of problem as well. So there are a number of factors that can contribute to you, yes, maybe being able to change your MOS, or no, not being able to change your MOS. So don't count on it. Don't go and think that, I'm going to join the Army, be this and do this job, and if I don't like it, I'll just change it later. That might not be an option for you. You might not be able to change that MOS. So you got to kind of, take account for that. And if you need a little bit of help trying to decide on what MOS to be able to join, I do have a video that you can check out right here. Check out that video to learn about some ways to help decide what MOS is best for you. If you want to check out the links down in the description box for affiliate links, social media, all that fun stuff, please do so. Make sure you subscribe, hit that thumbs up. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.